Speak to Hind Khadri in Deir el-Balah. We're going first to Hani Mahmoud in Gaza City. As I was just saying, Hani, that is where many of the attacks happened in the last several hours. Just bring us up to date with what's been happening there.
Well, it's hard to believe that a few weeks ago that the hospital here was pretty quiet, and once again we're returning to what happened in the past 15 months. We're seeing more people in the hospital here. These are the remaining family members, their friends, their remaining people who survived the attacks across the northern part and Gaza City are here at the al-Ahli hospital. With more people being brought to the hospital, we were told by medical staff, the vast majority who were transferred to the hospital as early as 2 a.m. in the morning. Up till just the past 45 minutes, more bodies are being recovered from under the rubble and transferred to the hospital already here. We're talking about close to 250 people have been killed across the Gaza Strip. Of the 250 people, 28 in central area and 113 in the city of Khan Younis and the southern part of the Strip. That's the number. It's the number of bodies that have been identified by surviving family members. There are still people who are missing, unable to be identified at the hospital. The Israeli military carried out a series of coordinated airstrikes across the Gaza Strip that targeted schools, evacuation centers, residential buildings, public facilities that turned into evacuation centers and displacement centers for displaced Palestinians. Let's not forget, many of the Palestinians are still staying in those evacuation centers and public facilities that turned into evacuation centers for them simply because their homes were completely destroyed or they happen to be in an areas that the Israeli military is still occupying. They did not have the opportunity to go back to their homes or set up tents near these areas. So they remain inside these evacuation centers. So once again, we're seeing these evacuation centers that include the public facilities, the schools, and other areas that have turned into a death trap. The attacks happened and caught everyone by surprise because it was not until 45 minutes later of these attacks across the Strip, the Israeli military issued a statement claiming responsibility for the attacks across the Gaza Strip. What we're hearing from people here who showed up at the hospital, they're still searching for missing family members. They're not sure whether they were killed, whether they went missing on somewhere. They come to the hospital here to check on the registry if they were admitted as early hour of this morning or not. It's another layer of tragedy, another layer of misery, and yet more people are pushed now into enforced disappearance. The intensity of the bombing, this is one example that was shared with us. The intensity of the bombing was so massive that many of the people were thrown, particularly the attacks on residential buildings. Many of the people who were killed were thrown out of the buildings and were collected. The flesh was collected from the yards of other homes in the western part of Gaza City and from the streets before they were transferred to the hospital. Tragically, we're going back to the same exact familiar wording. We're seeing women and children are making up the majority of people who were killed in those buildings. We're seeing more death and more destruction, and the dominating scene in the hospital here, seeing hardworking, crying father, we're seeing here collapse, women here over the bodies of their children and loved ones inside the al-Ahli hospital.
Yeah, Hani, it's one thing we should maybe point out to people who are just joining us. The noise that they can hear in the background behind you there is, I'm guessing, another Israeli drone. And that's not something we've heard over the last 17 days or so, or certainly for the duration of the ceasefire. But the drones are there to monitor what's going on in the Strip, and sometimes they carry weapons as well. As I say, that's not something we've heard for a long time. We're hearing it a lot now. But I want to talk to you about the medical situation, because we're in day 17 of a blockade that Israel has imposed on Gaza. Nothing has been getting into Gaza. No food, fuel, no electricity. Shut off the electricity. There's no water, but particularly no medical supplies. And I understand there are now 342 people known to have died as a result of the attacks that we had in the last several hours. That's going to put, again, tremendous strain on the medical crews.
Absolutely, Rob, and we're really seeing this small hospital that has turned from a very small, marginal, private, charitable health organization into a major stream health organization accommodating 1,000 of patients and injuries in the past 15 months. The past period of time, during the ceasefire, the hospital was already struggling, was already overwhelmed by many of the cases that still needed medical care, necessary medical care inside its facilities. When we just, as of this morning, we're back on track, adding more pressure into the hospital that is major parts of it render non-operational, simply because of the acute shortage of medical supplies, the insufficient medical staff available at the hospital. We just spoke briefly as we walked into the hospital. One medical staff who said they have been busy since 2 a.m. non-stop, carrying out and performing surgeries for the people who needed immediately surgeries without the necessary medical supplies, without the necessary medical care. The operating theater here has not been prepared to accommodate this large number. What happened as the large number of injuries arrived to the hospital, it operated as a shock to the hospital to the point it did not know what to accommodate. Doctors literally told us they had to choose which one to get the medical care, because they had to prioritize the cases. Some of the cases arrived here, and due to the lack of medical supplies are quite untreatable. They had to pay attention to other cases whom they had at least a little bit of percentage that they were going to be treated and to be safe. And that's the hardest part. Doctors and medical staff at Al-Ahli Hospital have to take and to do every single day in the past 15 months. Unfortunately, it's back on track, and they're doing the same exact thing starting from last night when the attacks happened. Not just the medical supplies, the fuel is running out here. Many of the necessary and vital life machines here are depending on every liter of fuel. And without the fuel, we're talking about 17 days of suffocating blockade, that none of these essential items, whether the supplies, the medical supplies, the fuel, and other basic necessities and equipment needed for the hospital were not allowed by the Israeli military. Just leaving an entire hospital is struggling to provide medical care. And we're talking about just basic medical care, nothing advanced, nothing proper so far. And the fact that many people are dying here is because of two things. The attacks are severe, the injuries causing, or the attacks causing severe injuries here. They could be treated if the supplies were here, if the equipment were here, if the operating theater was prepared very well, but not anymore due to the blockade.
Hani, thank you very much indeed. Hani Mahmoud there talking to us from Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir el-Balah. I want to go to Hind Qadri, who is in Deir el-Balah. Hind, this must come as a tremendous shock to many people in Gaza, because for however perhaps fragile the ceasefire has been, there has been some cease of military activity in Gaza for the last couple of weeks or so, for the duration of the ceasefire. And now, so out of the blue, with no warning, we've got Israeli attacks.
Well, it was a surprise and a shock for every single person in the Gaza Strip. Most of the people were actually sleeping and woke up on the sound of the massive bombardment. Now, what we also need to know is this ceasefire was very fragile, where at least 100 Palestinians were killed during the 2 months of ceasefire. Now, yes, it was very fragile, but Palestinians were not expecting this. It's Ramadan, everyone's fasting, everyone was expecting that they would at least spend the last days of Ramadan without any airstrikes. Now, what we also need to know is how the bombardment happened. It took, the Israeli forces carried a couple of airstrikes in different areas across the Gaza Strip. Now, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, at least 310 Palestinians were killed. There are a lot of people missing and trapped under the rubble. But we also have a new update. The Israeli authorities restricted all the Palestinian medical evacuations that used to leave every single day through the Rafah crossing. We're talking about 50 Palestinians either injured, or Palestinians with cancer or with chronic diseases. And all of these Palestinians are now banned from leaving the Gaza Strip. More restrictions. We're talking about 17 days without food, without fuel, without desalination plants operating, without the vital services for the Palestinians. So they were already suffering to get a meal for their children. Now they're also suffering and also being bombed by the Israeli forces. Palestinians are very, very desperate. You see everyone in a shock. Parents are scared. They're trying to protect their children in any way, but also Palestinians were not ready with this. They were waiting for any hopeful news, but actually this is very depressing, and everyone is very scared. This will not stop.
Hind, is there any indication from people that you've been talking to that they are concerned that this may not just be a one-off, that there may be more strikes and there may be more military action?
Well, actually, Palestinians are very, very scared, especially the fact that some people went to the north, some people are in the south. Palestinians are split between two areas now, where some of the families were actually preparing the houses, cleaning houses and fixing houses. And now Palestinians are very scared there's going to be a ground invasion. They're also scared that Netzarim is going to close, and Palestinians are going to be split just like they were split during the war. There are a lot of concerns. Palestinians are being deprived from their basic necessities. Talking about food, we have been seeing people queuing on water lines, queuing on bakeries, queuing on hot meal kitchens, and every day the situation is getting worse and worse. And now all of this is happening and new airstrikes. Now we have been here in the middle area where at least 27 people have been killed in the past couple of hours, and we have been also hearing constant explosions in different areas, in the western areas and also in the eastern areas. I'm looking at the children here displaced in Al-Aqsa hospital. Everyone's frightened, especially the children, and they're asking us, is this gonna take long? Is the war back? And all of these questions do not have any answers. This was a surprise attack. The massive wave of airstrikes have been surprising for everyone. Palestinians are not expecting this, and there's zero type of safety or security where Palestinians do not have any source of safety in the current moment.
Hind Khalri talking to us from Deir el-Balah. Hind, thank you very much indeed.